If you work the night shift at a 24-hour store and hear something restocking the shelves at 2 a.m., check if it's human. I will not name the chain or the address of this store because management would condemn me for discrediting the brand faster than I could finish speaking. Corporations have long arms and very sharp teeth when it comes to their reputation. But if you ever find yourself in one of those enormous 24-hour hypermarkets in the suburbs, where the ceilings are so high they disappear into shadow, and you see at the very end of the toy aisle a windowless door with an old sign that reads "Staff Only, Warehouse Number 4, just walk past it. Do not stop. Do not listen. Even if it seems to you that someone behind that door is crying softly and hopelessly, keep walking. It is not a person. It is bait." My name is Mark. I am 18, and that summer I had just graduated from high school. College was ahead of me, and the bills were growing like mushrooms after rain. So I took my first serious job, night stalker. My shift lasted from 10 in the evening until 6 in the morning. It was the time when the vast space of the hypermarket filled with artificial white fluorescent light that makes your eyes ache after an hour and leaves a metallic taste in your mouth. The store closed to customers at midnight, and I was left alone with endless rows of shelves. Somewhere in the security office at the other end of the building, old Harry slept, his snoring the only living sound in that kingdom of plastic and concrete. I loved the silence at first. It seemed peaceful to me. I did not know that in places like that, silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something holding its breath. The air was sterile, smelling of cardboard, cleaning chemicals, and something else. A faint scent of old, overheated plastic that usually comes from cheap toys left in the sun too long. Around 2 in the morning, I was working in the baby food aisle. The job was monotonous. Remove the protective film, place the jars with labels facing forward, maintain a perfect line. My mind was slowly drifting into a half-asleep state when I noticed something strange. On one of the shelves, where jars of zucchini puree were supposed to be, there appeared a row of jars that I definitely had not placed there. The labels were designed in the same corporate style as the rest of the products, but the images on them made my heart skip a beat. On one jar was a child's face with its mouth sewn shut, and large letters declared, "Your silence." On another, a human eye floating in a murky liquid, labeled, "Taste of Fear." I picked up the jar. It was heavy and unnaturally cold, as if it had just been taken out of a freezer, even though the shelf was not refrigerated. I felt a cold draft run across the back of my neck, although the air conditioning system ran at minimum at night. From deep within the aisle, around the corner where the fluorescent lights for some reason grew dim and yellow, a sound emerged. It was not a human step. It was a thick, rhythmic creaking of dry plastic against plastic, accompanied by a heavy thud, as if someone were dragging a mannequin with jammed mechanisms across the floor. The sound was getting closer, and with each repetition, I wanted to dissolve into the concrete floor. I carefully peered around the shelf, holding my breath. My fingers painfully gripped the metal box cutter. What I saw did not fit within the boundaries of sanity. In the middle of the aisle stood a figure. It was incredibly tall, at least 7 feet. It wore an old, faded version of our store's uniform that hung on its dry body like it was draped over a hanger. But the worst part was the face. It was a single mask made of white glossy plastic, perfectly smooth, with painted eyebrows and a frozen, unnatural mannequin smile. It had no elbows or knees, its arms and legs were straight, awkward tubes. It moved by repositioning its limbs entirely, which created that unbearable creaking sound. The creature, which I mentally named the night merchandiser, was slowly and with mechanical precision arranging merchandise on the shelf. But they were not jars. With its long, thin plastic fingers, it was taking real human teeth out of a cardboard box. It arranged them in neat rows, sorting them by size and shape as if they were expensive jewelry. When it finished with one row, it suddenly froze. The plastic head, without moving its shoulders, slowly turned 180 degrees directly toward me. The painted eyes stared through me, and the long index finger slowly rose and pointed at an empty spot on the shelf beside the teeth. It made no sound, but I understood clearly. It was waiting for new merchandise, and that merchandise was supposed to be me. I ran. My footsteps echoed loudly off the walls, but the creaking behind me did not fall behind. The merchandiser was not running, yet its strides were so enormous that it crossed the distance between departments in seconds. I rushed past the household chemicals aisle, smelling bleach mixing with my own sweat. I ran into the toy section, hoping to lose myself among the shelves, but it became even worse there. All the dolls and stuffed animals on the shelves now had the same plastic faces as the creature. Thousands of tiny painted eyes watched my escape.
Staff only.
The voice echoed. It was not a human voice. It was like the sound of styrofoam scraping against glass that somehow formed words. I reached the service entrance, but the magnetic lock would not respond. The code I entered every night now seemed invalid. Behind me, a loud creak sounded. The merchandiser stood at the end of the aisle, blocking the exit. It slowly raised its arms, and I saw its fingers unfolding, transforming into sharp plastic spikes. It was enjoying my helplessness, slowly approaching and creating a symphony of horror with its awkward joints. In panic, I glanced around and noticed the red box of the main breaker and the fire suppression lever on the wall. It was my last chance. The merchandiser was already 10 steps away from me. Its plastic mask gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the painted smile seemed even wider. I jumped to the lever and pulled it down with all my strength. A sharp alarm blared throughout the hypermarket, and a second later powerful streams of water burst from the ceiling. Cold rain drenched both of us. The creature suddenly stopped. As water seeped into its plastic joints, a strange reaction occurred. Instead of sliding smoothly, its joints began producing a horrible grinding sound, like an old engine seizing up. It tried to take a step, but its leg jammed with a loud crack. It flickered, jerking in convulsions as if a short circuit ran through its lifeless body. The creaking became unbearable, turning into a high-pitched shriek. The merchandiser froze, transforming into an ordinary, motionless display in the middle of the aisle. I did not wait a second. Taking advantage of the automatic system unlocking all exits due to the fire alarm, I burst through the service doors into the night air. I ran to my car without looking back and drove away, not even retrieving my belongings from the locker room. The next morning, I quit by phone. The manager was shouting something about losses from the flooded store, but I simply hung up. I found another job, a courier outdoors. I promised myself never to enter shopping centers after sunset again. A month passed. The horror began to fade, turning into a bad memory you blame on exhaustion and hallucinations. One Saturday evening, I entered a small local grocery store near my home to buy dinner supplies. It was an ordinary shop lit with warm light, smelling of fresh bread. I was walking past the canned goods aisle when my gaze involuntarily stopped at the highest shelf, almost under the ceiling. There, in the shadow, stood a single jar. I felt my legs turn to cotton, and the basket slipped from my hands, scattering groceries across the floor. On the label was my own face. It was not a photograph, but a masterfully drawn image capturing every detail of my terror that night. My eyes in the picture were wide open, and my mouth was frozen in a silent scream. At the bottom, in large letters, it read, "New, the remains of your summer." I slowly lifted my eyes higher and saw a long white plastic finger slowly emerging from behind the shelf, gently stroking the jar, adjusting it so that the label faced directly toward me. I realized that to the night merchandiser, the entire world is just one enormous store, and I have long since been entered into its catalog. Do you think you've escaped the nightmarish nightmare if your car starts? Casey thought so too, until he found a rusty key to room 9 in his bag and the same dirty ventilation grate on the ceiling of his apartment. This story will prove to you that some companions from the desert stay with you forever.